This video describes how to fill out WorP's Task tab. The video assumes that you have watched the previous videos in this series, which are all linked in the below description. Go ahead and open up your copy of WorPT. Click on the Task tab. You'll note that there are some black plus signs running along the top. Those are toggle switches which collapse and expand a group of columns. For now, let's just keep all the columns collapsed, but don't forget that there are some columns hidden here. If you ever need assistance, you can always click the Help button, which will produce a little menu on the right-hand side. The very first time that you click that Help button, you will be given a permission text box. You'll have to click through that, and once you've accepted the permission, then you have to go back and click on Help again, and then from there on, you'll be able to bring up the help simply by clicking on the button. The Help button is specific to the particular sheet that you happen to be on when you click the button. If there are any cells that are white, gray, or lavender color, those cells are automatically populated with formulas, so you shouldn't bother them. The tasks that are related to your proposal should be organized under main task categories, like you can see in the black font, and which start in the column D. As you enter tasks in the sheet, these groups of related tasks will appear together under this category. And then you'll have the individual tasks that are related to that category underneath, which you see in the blue font here as placeholders. For your very first task, just type in the title of that category of tasks, and then list all the tasks that are related to that category below. You can add more rows if you need by doing it the usual Google Sheet way. And you can also delete rows. I'll be back in just a minute with some tasks populating the spreadsheet. I've just about populated all the tasks, but I wanted to put in the last category so that you can see how that entry is done, and also to point out something. You'll note that there is a hidden row near the bottom. Don't unhide that row, or if you do happen to unhide it, please hide it back, because what is now row number 16 should always remain empty in order for the formulas to work the way that they need to be working. And also, never ever write in the red row. But I do want to add another group of tasks here. So what I'm going to do is right click on row 15 and then insert a row below. So that's the correct way to add something at the very bottom rather than selecting the red row and trying to insert above. Always click on one of the yellow rows and then add a row relative to that yellow row. Add this last group of tasks. And a couple of rows below that. To make the subtask under that category, I start typing from this column. I've made up some nonsensical task names, but they'll work okay for our example here. The next step will be to enter data into the task timelines. For each task, not the task category, but the actual tasks themselves, the things that are in blue, what you want to do is type in a dash for when the task begins, and then another dash for when the task ends. When you enter those dashes, the sheet will turn that timeline blue. You can delete the dashes and redo them differently if you need to. The timelines can extend across the year boundaries. This is year 1, year 2, year 3, divided up into quarters. And if your proposal goes longer than 3 years, just click the plus sign and you can expand out to 5 years. Our proposal is only going to be 3 years. You can also just have a single dash to indicate that all of the work will happen in that one quarter. We have now entered our timelines. The next step is to enter the team information. So let's take care of the task lead first. Task lead person will be the person responsible for coordinating the task and making sure that the task gets done. Typically, you would want to put a funded proposal member as the task lead person. The identification is the person's initials or whatever you listed under the ID on the personnel and FTE page. Then the next column are the total number of solid work weeks that would be required to do the task by that person. That time can be spread over the timescale that you've indicated over in these columns. If the person has been indicated as being a collaborator or an otherwise unfunded team member, the sheet will automatically copy and paste the number of work weeks that you put in this column into the next column to the right, which is sort of a cost sharing column and funding that would not be provided by this proposal. There may be cases for which work by the PI or some other paid proposal member is covered elsewhere outside of this proposal. And if such is the case, then what you need to do is manually write in the number of work hours that would be needed to accomplish that task, but would not be covered by the proposal in this second column here. If other team members are contributing to the task, then they would go under the team expertise section. You can list up to 5 people, but it's typically best to try to stick with just 3 for purposes of making the resulting LaTeX table look nice. You enter the same kind of data that you entered for the task lead, their identification, and in the next column would be how many total work weeks that they would be working on that particular task. If they happen to be a funded team member, but some fraction of the work will be covered by some other source of funds, then you would list the number of hours that are covered outside of this proposal in this other column. Let me just step away for a minute and populate some of this data. I have filled out the task lead and team expertise section. A couple of things that I want to point out. If you try to type in the initials of someone who doesn't exist, for example, I'm going to type in AA, the script will immediately realize your mistake and let you know that that is not a team member. If you forget who is who, always flip back to your personnel and FTE sheet and you can look at the ID column to see who is who. Because everyone on the team is listed as PI or a co-I, the implication is that these are funded people. And so the code did not automatically copy these hours over into the not covered by this proposal column. Let's see what happens if I change one of these people to be a collaborator rather than a co-I. So now you see that for every occurrence of PM, who is now an unpaid collaborator, the number of hours required by a task for that person is copied into the second column to indicate that those hours are not part of this proposal's budget, but are rather going to be covered outside of this proposal. I'm going to go ahead and change PM back to a co-I, however. And in doing that, these numbers didn't revert back. What this demonstrates is that it is possible, even for a paid team member, for you to account for some of their hours as being needed to do the task at hand, but to be covered by some source of funding outside of this proposal. So I'm just going to remove these numbers, however. Just to show how these numbers look in the resulting LaTeX files, I think I will keep a couple. So let's say out of this 4 hours, 2 of those are going to be paid for outside of this proposal. And I keep on saying hours, but the unit of measure here is weeks, not hours. For this person, let's say out of 8 hours, 2 of those are going to be covered by external resources. As you fill out the FTEs, you will note that the rightmost columns in white automatically populate with some numbers for FTEs. What these numbers are taking the number of work weeks and converting into percentages of work years. For example, this very first row says that 0.27 FTEs are needed in total for this particular task. Out of that, 0.04 FTEs are needed but not going to be paid for by this proposal. And 0.23 FTEs are going to be funded by this proposal. If you forget what the columns mean, you can always go to the notes. You will also note that there was a tally of total FTEs up here. These are the totals integrated over all years. The total number of FTEs, the total number of FTEs that are not funded by this proposal, the total number of FTEs that will be reflected in the requested budget. If you flip back to personnel and FTE, you'll note one other thing. The FTEs per person has now been filled out for years 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, which of course, we don't use for this proposal. You'll see the total FTEs per person, the grand total summed over all 3 years. You click on these plus signs, the columns expand out so that you can see what part of that FTE would be paid by the budget, which would be under this green money bag column, and what parts are paid for by sources outside of the proposal, sort of matching funds, which you'll see in the no dollar columns for each year. Now that we have finished filling out the task tab, you may now go to the next video, which describes how to fill out the non-labor costs.